Yesterday's press briefing with Donald Trump was outrageous. His mind seemed to sort of turn to mush before our very eyes with bizarre claim after bizarre claim. I'm going to give you very little lead up and just get right into the clips. I've gotten some complaints recently. David, get to the clips, talk about them after. So let's just do it. Clip number one.
Yeah, please, Jeff.
Thank you, sir. I'd like to ask you a question about something you said in Bedminster as well. You said that you're planning to issue an executive order to ensure that health insurance companies prevent or cover people with pre-existing conditions, and you said that that had never been done before, but that's not the case because that is the law under the Affordable Care Act. So my question is, why do you need to issue an executive order for law that is already existing?
But I didn't say. I said as an executive order. As you said as an executive order. It hasn't been done before. We want to be able to assure people that pre-existing condition is always taken care of.
This is truly one of the dumbest things I've heard Trump say. And Jeff Mason, you might remember, I just dealt with this yesterday on the show. Jeff Mason, the reporter, is spot on. Pre-existing conditions are already covered in the United States. They've been covered for 10 years. They must be covered by health insurance companies. You can't be denied coverage because of pre-existing conditions. Because of Obamacare, we do not need an executive order for something that's a law. And Trump comes up with this idea. And as you can see, when he's pushed to come up with stuff on the spot, it doesn't go well. Trump says, well, I want to redouble it because it's never been mandated by executive order. So we just want to be like extra sure. This is absolutely ridiculous. This is like saying, murder is only illegal by law. We've never outlawed murder by executive order. We sort of need an executive order from a president against murder because otherwise we only have a law against killing other people. We don't have an executive order. I have a hard time imagining a dumber argument for why you would need an executive order for something that's already the law. Tax fraud is only illegal by law. Why hasn't Trump passed an executive order saying we are not going to allow tax fraud in the United States? It's as dumb as it sounds, okay? Let's continue now on the topic of 160,000 American deaths due to coronavirus.
If 160,000 people had died on President Obama's watch, do you think you would have called for his resignation?
No, I wouldn't have done that. I think it's been amazing what we've been able to do. If we didn't close up our country, we would have had 1.5 or 2 million people already dead. We've called it right. Now we don't have to close it. We understand the disease. Nobody understood it because nobody's ever seen anything like this.
So the question is a good one. If coronavirus hit when Barack Obama was president and we had 160,000 deaths, would you, Donald Trump, be calling for the resignation of Barack Obama? And Trump says no. And of course, there's a tweet for everything. There's actually 4 or 5 tweets, but just to show you one, Donald Trump did call for Barack Obama's resignation because one guy with Ebola got into the United States through an American airport. Trump tweeted back in 2014, days before the 2014 midterms. And you might remember that the day after the 2014 midterms, we never heard another word about Ebola because it actually was not an outbreak of any importance in the United States. Trump said, if this doctor who so recklessly flew into New York from West Africa has Ebola, then Obama should apologize to the American people and resign. But resign over 160,000 dead? No, he would never call for that. Because why? It's Trump this time. That's actually the only difference. Next, again, with 1917. Listen closely to this one.
The closest thing is in 1917, they say, right? The great pandemic certainly was a terrible thing where they lost anywhere from 50 to 100 million people. Probably ended the Second World War. All the soldiers were sick. That was a terrible situation. And
so again with the 1917 stuff. Now, of course, the 1918 flu was in 1918. We've interviewed historians who are experts in the 1918 pandemic. I asked in very clear and simple terms, is there any logical reason you can think of why Donald Trump would call it the 1917 flu? No reason that we can think of. But then Trump says the 1917 flu which is really the 1918 flu, probably ended World War II. Now, if you are even remotely connected to time and the fact that it moves forward, as far as we know, with our human understanding of it, World War II was decades after the 1918 flu pandemic. I can't make any sense of it. Maybe he meant World War I, which would also be wrong, but at least it would be in the ballpark in terms of the right decade. Trump asked about 100,000 kids, nearly 100,000 kids, testing positive for coronavirus in the last 2 weeks of July. That's a very short period of time. And Trump insists schools should open. And yes, he insists that children are basically immune.
On coronavirus, 97,000 children tested positive for coronavirus in the last 2 weeks in July, according to the American Academy of Pediatrics. Does that give you any pause about schools reopening for in-person learning?
Because they may have, as you would call it, a case, it may be a case, but it's also a case where there's a tiny fraction of death. Tiny fraction, and they get better very quickly. Yeah, they may have it for a short period of time, but as you know, the seriousness of it in terms of what it leads to is extraordinarily small, very, very much less than 1%.
So do you still believe that children are essentially immune?
Yeah, I think that for the most part they do very well. I mean, they don't get very sick.
The truth is that every week we learn more about kids actually being very efficient carriers of coronavirus. Now, some get very sick. It's not that common. That's true. But kids can be huge vectors of spreading the disease. And in fact, there was I don't know now if it was it might have been some kind of Christian summer camp. I don't remember exactly, somewhere in the Midwest. And they had a big outbreak. And as they tested the kids, the younger cohorts had more and more coronavirus. So, if you take like the 13 to 17, they had less than the 12 to, 8 to 12. And then the really young kids had even more. So this appears to be completely wrong, but the facts don't matter. They really don't matter. And unfortunately, it's not just to Trump that they don't matter. They don't matter to his followers either. So now let's get to Trump's new strategy to try to say how great we're doing on coronavirus. I'm not going to tell you what you're going to see here, but see if you can spot the strategy.
Including the short term and the lab tests. The lab tests take a little bit longer. And Dr. Birx was telling me a little while ago that we're down to 2 days and 2.5 days on getting your result on the lab test. The other ones, you get them in 5 minutes to 15 minutes, so that's exciting. But countries in every continent are seeing increases in cases. In recent days, cases have rapidly increased in Japan and Australia, unfortunately, and they're now experiencing higher peaks than they did in March. To the south of our border, cases have continued to surge in Mexico, Central America, Argentina, Colombia, Peru, Brazil, and throughout Latin America. It's really the hot spot. It's posing a major challenge for this continent. Latin America is now the region with the most number of confirmed cases by far, despite a relative scarcity of testing.
So Trump mentions Japan and Australia. Japan and Australia are having second waves, so everybody's in trouble and the U.S. really isn't that bad off. There's actually a lot here to understand. So first of all, when you look at a country like Australia, Australia has, as of this morning, 331 coronavirus deaths total. That number is maybe giving you a double take. Could that really be true? Yes, total 331 Australians have died from coronavirus. We often have 500 deaths in one day, 1,000 deaths in one day, 1,500 deaths in one day. At the peak, we had even more. Australia does have a recent uptick in cases, but only up to a few hundred cases per day. We have 40,000 cases a day, 60,000 cases a day, 80,000 cases a day. But the real difference is that Australia has immediately started shutting back down and extending guidelines. Whereas in the United States, when we have 40, 60, 80,000 cases a day, you get people parroting talking points like, we have a lot of cases because we test so much, and we certainly don't need to close anything. Trump mentioned Japan, very similar. Japan has a population of 125 million. That's about 35% of the population of the United States. Okay. They have 1,000 deaths total, okay? Per capita, Japan's death rate is dramatically lower than the United States. And Trump is right. Japan is seeing more cases over the last 10 days. They have a fraction of the cases we do per capita, and they are immediately expanding guidelines and shutting things down. So comparing the US to Australia and Japan, first of all, has to be done on a per capita basis. But most importantly, they are seeing cases go up and they are shutting down because they are taking it seriously. We are not. One little clip here about car companies. Check this out.
12 million. We're 12 million above expectations, which is pretty remarkable. Today we had great reports on new job openings, and there's clearly a housing boom, which has been incredible numbers in both housing and an automobile boom. We've rarely seen anything like it, and it's going on right now in America. Inventories are at rock bottom. Used car sales are at record levels. And we will have rebuilt. We're doing a rebuilding like nobody's ever seen. It's a big plus for manufacturing and construction. So construction's getting close to record territory. Manufacturing's doing very well. The car companies are doing great. Very happy for Michigan, the state of Michigan. We have a lot of car companies moving in. A lot of plants are being built and expanded in Michigan and Ohio.
Now, just about everything Trump says there is a lie. Claiming everything is at a record high, construction's at a everything's just doing better than ever. But he makes the very specific claim that car companies are moving into Michigan and Ohio. I looked around, I was able to find no evidence of that. And, there really aren't that many automakers. So when you make a claim like automakers are just moving into Michigan and Ohio and opening stuff up, it's really easy to fact check because there aren't that many automakers, quite frankly. And again, a provable lie. Here's one where I'll introduce a little bit more. Trump got an actual policy question. That was not just kind of rant about coronavirus for 2 minutes. And he just can't discuss policy in any depth whatsoever. He has nothing to say. This is a Brazilian reporter. Check this out.
Thank you. Did you ask the U.S. ambassador in Brazil to focus his efforts in eliminating ethanol tariffs in Brazil?
You can't, yeah.
You asked the ambassador in Brazil to focus his efforts to eliminate ethanol tariffs in Brazil?
We haven't really discussed that too much, but at some point we probably will be. And we don't want people tariffing us. And if they tariff us, although I must tell you, I have a very good relationship with President Bolsonaro. He's great. And I hear he's doing well. He's recovered from having COVID-19, as they say. And that's great. And send him my regards. I think that as far as Brazil is concerned, if they do tariffs, we have to have an equalization of tariffs. And we are going to be presenting something having to do with tariffs and fairness and tariffs, because we have many countries for many years that have been charging us tariffs.
He just mutters coronavirus, Bolsonaro, we have a good relationship, COVID-19, as they say hello to him for me. If they do tariffs, we do tariffs. No ability whatsoever to discuss policy in detail. And then here's the last one. Trump again with his predictions about the future of coronavirus.
And people should vote like they did in World War I and World War II. And your numbers will be, in 90 days or less, your numbers will be very good, I think, much better on the coronavirus or the China virus. But it's something you have to look at and say, this is just crazy. This just came out, 500,000 incorrect ballot applications sent all over the state of Virginia.
So before changing topic randomly there, Trump says in 90 days, things will be good. This is the guy who was it March or April where he said 15 cases are soon going to be 0. He has no idea about any of this stuff. Nothing he predicts can or should be taken seriously. And you really saw during this press briefing, Donald Trump's mind becoming mush. There's just nothing there. There's no critical thinking. There's no analysis. There's no connection to the facts. And sadly, as I mentioned earlier in the show, 60, 62 million, 64, 66, maybe 68 million Americans are going to vote for 4 more years. If that doesn't motivate you to vote, regardless of the state you live in, there's probably nothing that will motivate you to vote. We'll have more coverage of this on the David Pakman Show Instagram, which is at David Pakman Show. You can follow me there as well at david.pakman. Privacy.com is one of our sponsors, and they're giving you $5 just for using their free service at privacy.com/Pakman. Privacy is a service I've been using for a while now. I love it. It saves me a bunch of headaches. It's completely free, and it's very quick to set up. And here's how it works. When you pay for something online or over the phone, instead of exposing your real credit card number, Privacy lets you generate virtual card numbers. The payments are withdrawn from your checking account, but your real card number stays completely private, and you do it all with one click. You can autofill the card number in your web browser, on the phone. You can create 12 virtual cards a month. You can set spending limits, freeze them, delete them whenever you want. I especially love it for free trials where you need to give a credit card number, because I can destroy the virtual card number as soon as I give it to the company, and I know I won't be charged in the future. If you're ordering food over the phone, why do I need to give a restaurant my real card number if I don't have to? Companies don't have to know who you are. Your real credit card number is protected from the data breaches that happen, unfortunately, more often than we would like, and it's completely free. They do have a paid version with different tiers where you can create more virtual credit card numbers per month, cashback rewards, extra security features. But go ahead and sign up for the free service. It's a no-brainer. Companies can't charge you unexpectedly. You're protected from identity theft. It costs you nothing. And Privacy is giving you $5 to spend just for signing up when you go to privacy.com/Pakman.